Now that we've reconvened the board meeting, I want to give you a pickup we've had from external, and that's apparently that the in-room volume does not reflect what people are hearing online. So they've dialed down the volume in this room, and they would like us to speak a little closer to our mics when we speak. Now that we're reconvened, yesterday the board meeting convened 2 joint meetings of its committees. Following each meeting, the board moved into closed session to discuss legally sensitive issues, which I mentioned earlier, related to the management's proposed acquisition approach and the final statutory interpretations of several provisions of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act. The discussion included vigorous debate. As a matter of fact, I was reflecting this morning with another board member. I don't think I've ever seen this board as engaged and opinionated, passionate, and fervent about the packet of issues we discussed yesterday. This was no roll and gavel tap meeting. It was really healthy. The discussion resulted in recommendations by the committees on management's proposal for consideration by the full board, which is before us today. We now want to have the management team present in this public session its proposed approaches for board consideration and vote. We will begin with a presentation of management's proposed final statutory interpretations, although I don't like the word final because I don't think it's going to be final, right? There is always a twist or a turn or an adjustment or a further consideration. I think what we're really talking about is here's where we are today, and this is the best decision we have as we move forward in our procurement approach and strategy. But those interpretations will be given by our counsel, Jason Karp. Then we'll hear from our CEO, Mike Poth, and FirstNet Management's proposed acquisition approach. And after each of the presentations, FirstNet board will have an opportunity to discuss it and or make formal motions. So with that, I am going to turn over to Chief Counsel Jason Karp, who will give our audience a sense of what we discussed with respect to interpretations of our enabling legislation and what that means for the RFP. Jason.
Terrific. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and thank you to the public and to the board. I think we've had some terrific debate over the last day on many issues. We've got some critical decisions that we're making, and this is kind of one element of that that really I think is going to impact us both operationally and from the perspective of getting an RFP out at the end of the year and giving offers the kind of certainty that they need in order to give us sound proposals. So I want to take you through just a little bit. I'm going to run through this, I think, relatively quick. Obviously, any questions are always welcome, but it should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to start with just for the benefit of the board and the public, just a little bit of history about our rulemaking proceedings and the actions that FirstNet has taken to date. And not to get too legalistic about it, but you're always in danger when you give the lawyer the clicker here. Most executive agency and rulemaking and proceedings and actions taken by agencies are governed by the Administrative Procedures Act. We call it the APA affectionately. And it governs federal agency action, and it sets forth kind of the rules, the legal framework for how rules are made, and provides various rights and obligations of the government and parties who may be seeking redress. The unique thing about FirstNet, and the reason I raise it, is because by statute, FirstNet is exempt from the application of the relevant rules of the APA. So we don't have to follow those procedures. And that gives us a lot of flexibility as an organization in terms of how we want to move forward with these interpretations. And the chief noted it. We've got to make the best decisions and the best timing that are appropriate for us. And our act really gives us the flexibility to do that. And so I think that's really important to note. It also means we don't have to do this, right? But we're doing this for a variety of different reasons. We have, as folks know, published now 3 public notices and sought comment. We've received somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, close to 200 comments altogether throughout these proceedings. It's been very vigorous. And really the goal was to provide the stakeholder community, the vendor community, information about our thinking, about where we were going on key interpretations of the Act, to give them information, but just as much to seek feedback from them. I mean, this has been a very iterative process for us. It's been very informative. There are a lot of issues that these folks have tremendous expertise on, and we really wanted to get the benefit of that. As you know, we also have consultation obligations under the Act, and those run fairly broadly. And although we talk about consultations with the states, which we do on a regular basis, we have broader consultation obligations under the Act more generally with a large constituent population. These public notices give us the opportunity to reach all of those folks, and everyone has an equal opportunity, whether they're a public-private citizen, a corporation, a vendor, a state, government agency, can all participate, respond to our comments, respond to our conclusions, and provide us their impact. So this has been a hugely beneficial process for us, and I just thought it was important to kind of level set and remind everybody what we were doing and why we did it. Let's see. So just to kind of get to the meat of it, basically where we are now is we tend to release, and I'm very, very proud to announce to the board, and assuming that you approve our ability to move forward on this, approximately 64 kind of decision points that we have been considering over the past several months, really since last December, or maybe even September, on a variety, a large variety of issues related to the Act, and really spanning kind of the gamut of different topics that are germane to the RFP. We'll take you through a little bit in more detail on the next slide, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things that, for example, we're addressing in these public notices, and important for the public to know. So, for example, the definition of rural, which is something we raised in our first public notice. And this is really an important issue, you know, and we got a lot of very, very good feedback on it. And the truth is, with almost all of these interpretations, including rural, we got a tremendous amount of support from our stakeholders on what we were trying to do. But there was some confusion, and we wanted to clarify some of that, and I think it's important to clarify it here. So when we talk about rural coverage, and when we talk about the definition of rural, and as you know, the Act mentions rural, I think, about 3 times in strategic places, but it never defines it. And one of the many gifts that the Act keeps on giving to FirstNet. And so it's really important for us to try to provide some delineation there. But what I want to be clear about is when we define rural, we're not defining coverage. And this was some confusion that we saw in the comments. Whether you're rural or you're considered not rural, that does not determine whether you get coverage or you don't get coverage. The key is, and you'll hear more about this as we move throughout the day, as everyone knows, rural is absolutely part of FirstNet's deployment strategy and requirement under the Act. In every phase of our building, in every phase of our deployment, there's going to be rural build-out milestones. And the definition of rural is really a guidepost for us to help make those determinations on coverage. How do we determine what those milestones are going to be? Not whether there's going to be coverage or not. And I think that's a really important distinction, and we make that clear in the final document that we hope to release. The one clarification we did make, we did ask the question about whether there should be a kind of bottom boundary of rural versus wilderness, where, you know, the sparsity of population is so great it shouldn't be considered rural anymore. And I think the feedback on that was relatively universal, that the answer is no. And we listened to that, and we've decided that that's not an artificial boundary we're going to create. So I think that's important. The second issue that I wanted to highlight was kind of this concept of existing infrastructure and use of existing infrastructure. This has been a big topic since the day FirstNet began. It's been an evolution, quite frankly, in how we've looked at it and how FirstNet intends to leverage existing infrastructure. Again, we've made very clear in our special notice and our draft RFP documents how we're going to be encouraging our partners very heavily to bring existing infrastructure to the table. The Act requires use of existing infrastructure to the extent it's economically desirable to do so, in many forms. So commercial infrastructure, wireless infrastructure, state and local government infrastructure, as we've all talked about. And each of those has their pros and cons, has their costs and benefits in terms of how we might be able to leverage them at different points in the deployment. So we've clarified kind of in our analysis of what the law requires and the concept of economic desirability. And while the first piece of that phrase is economic and cost. The truth is economics are driven by many, many different factors. And we wanted to clarify that when we think about economic desirability, whether it's us or a potential partner, we have to consider a lot of different things beyond just what does it cost. Time to deploy, use, hardening, whether it's an appropriate piece of equipment for what we're trying to do, interoperability, compatibility. There's a lot of things that we need to think about, when we talk about existing infrastructure. And I think folks, it's easy to lose sight and say, hey, we know that this government, this area, this locality has all of this available infrastructure. But the reality is, we have to look and analyze each piece of it and determine what's the right strategy for moving forward. And as we're looking, at moving forward now, we're really doing this through the RFP process. So we're going to be encouraging the potential partners who come to the table to leverage that infrastructure to the extent they economically can do so. So we've made some clarifications there. That's from our first notice. In our second notice, I highlight a couple of issues. One, generally our network policies. And we're not making any change here, but I think it's worth highlighting because it's such a critical element to the deployment of the network and to so many other issues that we touch on. Our network policies are something that are going to be deployed really on an ongoing basis, and they're going to change and they're going to be variable for a long period of time, and they're critical. One of the things we clarify, and we can kind of confirm our conclusion, is particularly in a situation where a state chooses to deploy its own radio access network, as we commonly know as opt-out. We preliminarily concluded in the original notice, and we confirm that our network policies have to apply across the board, whether a state assumes that responsibility or whether it's FirstNet's responsibility. And that's key. That's key for interoperability and to ensure that we have one nationwide network, no matter who is responsible for the deployment of pieces of it. That public safety, when they cross state boundaries, are getting the exact same user experience in state A as they are in state B. And as we know, public safety and public safety incidents don't stop at the state border. So this is a critical element to our deployment, and I think and an important clarification that we want to make sure that as offerers are coming to the table, they understand how this is going to work. And then finally, the last piece I wanted to confirm and kind of talk a little bit about is the concept of how the self-sustainability of FirstNet, the need to leverage fees and revenue generated by the network for the national deployment. And one of the conclusions we had made originally in the second notice was that where states assume responsibility for the radio access network, they also get the benefit of the associated spectrum in that particular locality and being able to leverage and monetize that spectrum with whatever partner that they're going to use in their deployment. The issue we have there is one where we need to ensure that any revenue that's generated, particularly in very highly dense, populated areas that will generate significant value for the excess capacity available, that money is appropriately reinvested back into the network, and we believe the statute requires reinvestment back into the network, bar none, period. But secondly, that it's reinvested in a way that benefits the entire nation, that we don't want the national deployment to in any way suffer because a particularly rich state that is able to generate significant revenue because of their population densities retains that revenue to create essentially a higher quality radio access network in their state than what we have in the other localities around the country. And this is really important because, as we all know, the majority of our country is rural, and the majority of our country is going to be very expensive to build out some of this infrastructure. And so it's critical that we are leveraging the high density, high revenue generating areas in order to be able to pay for the deployment nationally. We think that's absolutely what Congress intended. We think that's the intent of the Act and what the Act says, and we've reiterated that conclusion in the proposed documents that we hope to release. So those are kind of the key points there. I can take a breath if anyone's got any questions or comments, and then we'll kind of move on.
Jason, I think I really appreciated the way you said that. You know, we're responsible for building this nationwide network for public safety. And that doesn't mean 7 of 56 states, territories, and commonwealth. It means all 56, right?
That's
and
right.
That means we're going to have to take resources from areas that produce more and share them in the places that don't produce enough to build a network. And I think that's not a point that should be lost on anybody. That's our responsibility. Congress had plenty of opportunities to say this is for this state or this state, but they didn't. They said this is a nationwide network, and that's our charge. So I really love the fact that you're calling attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and I appreciate that. And the reality is, as we all know, is Congress gave us very limited resources to do this. They gave us a pool of cash, which is fantastic and is a great down payment, but as we all know, is not sufficient to build out a nationwide network in and of itself. And it gave us a spectrum, and we've got to leverage those, as most efficiently as we can to create an efficient network and to reach public safety across the nation. And that's critical. So those are some of the kind of the highlights. On the next slide, I just kind of point out what we've laid out for the public and for the board are the overall topics that we are addressing in the public notice. As you can see, it really spans the gap of different issues that potential RFP will rely on, and the key was we really wanted to get certainty on issues that we felt the RFP and the proposers had to rely on in order to make a proposal. And just pointing out some, we have some technical requirements here where we talk about the definition of core and RAN, which is critical. We mentioned rural and existing infrastructure. We talk a little bit about the fees and fee structure and what the Act allows there. We talked about covered leasing agreements, how that's going to work, and that the complexities associated with that. So it's really a very broad swath. There's a lot of decisions here, a lot of content here, I think, for everyone to digest. I mean, I think for the most part, we've stayed pretty true to the original interpretations that we made. We've tweaked where we felt appropriate or where we received feedback, and we noted a couple of those things as well. But hopefully this will give everyone a very clear roadmap for moving on. One thing I will mention is, as we know, we have issued 3 public notices. For the most part, the issues that we're addressing here are on the first 2 public notices. We're still doing work on the 3rd. There's a lot to evaluate there. We're in the middle of consultation to talk about users and public safety entity and kind of where that's going to go. Obviously the Act itself has the definition of public safety entity in it. I don't think there's any question in terms of the guidance we've given, and what is I think clear by statute that entities whose primary mission is going to be public safety, plain and simple. They're getting access to the network. I don't think anyone has a dispute on that topic. I don't think there's any question about that. So I want to reiterate that we have no question about that at all. But we do want to still kind of look at this issue to understand what kind of further guidance may be appropriate, going forward as we operationalize that. And then finally, just in terms of next step, to do this, we plan on publishing 2 kind of separate notice documents that we would release to the public in the upcoming days, assuming that the board approves our approach, corresponding to the first notice and the second notice. Of course, we're going to rely on these final interpretations as we finalize the RFP. And hope to provide guidance for offerers so that they are able to put in very sound and feel very comfortable about the proposals they're going to make. And of course, as always, we reserve the right, to issue further public notices as we need to if we feel that additional clarification or consultation is necessary. So with that, go back here. We would ask the board to consider the recommendation for moving forward on going final on these interpretations and open it for discussion, and certainly hope to get your vote.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate the enormous amount of work you guys did. And more importantly probably is for all the people that have been engaged with FirstNet to provide their insights, learning, and questions, which lead us to these times right here. These come from our future users and from people that will be touched by this network. At this point, the board is now ready to consider a resolution. Uzama, would you mind reading the operative portion of the resolution?
Now therefore be resolved that the board authorizes management to take such reasonable actions as are necessary to publish management's responses to comments, and final interpretations on certain provisions of its enabling legislation discussed in the first and second notice.
Thank you, Zama. The chair to entertain action on this resolution.
I move the resolution.
Okay. Kevin, you got a motion? Mary, you second? We have a motion and a second on the resolution. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. We're now moving into a discussion on acquisition plan and acquisition plan resolution. But before we do that, we need to first turn to the chair of our Finance Committee, the esteemed Governor Jim Douglas.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the bylaws provide for a recommendation from the Finance Committee as we move forward on an acquisition approach, and most of our colleagues were at the committee meeting yesterday and had an opportunity to participate in the discussion, but I can report to the board consensus of the committee that we move forward on the basis that will be described in just a few minutes. I think what you articulated at the outset of our meeting this morning, Mr. Chairman, was the best case for the importance of a nationwide approach to building on a network to serve the public safety needs of our nation and indeed the public. This is a network that needs to be available in each and every part of our country, and as we move forward in seeking and securing a partnership, it's critical that it be a nationwide solution. So the Finance Committee is recommending the approach that we'll discuss in just a minute, and hope that the board agrees.
Thank you, Governor. So next up, we have Mike and James, who will walk us through the discussion on the acquisition plan. This is the second important decision that the board will address today. So, Mike, if you'll fill us in.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair. FirstNet exists to ensure that the network meets the mission of public safety every step of the way. What we're doing, what public safety and the American people expect and need us to do. Every day in the news, we're reminded of this need. We will accomplish this critical mission through a public-private partnership, letting the private sector do what they do best to rapidly deploy a nationwide network. First off, FirstNet, we are on schedule for the issuance of the RFP. We continue to make significant and timely progress towards releasing this, but there's still much work to do over the next 90 days. A lot of work to do. Through our ongoing review, we've affirmed, and our consultation and feedback have also provided that these original 16 objectives are still relevant and still the critical foundation for the offer that we are going to put out. They're the right foundation for the national public safety broadband network. So how do these objectives, just a reminder to the board, how these objectives feed into and what will ultimately be an award and a contract? So we have the statement of objectives, those 16. Those are going to translate into RFP requirements that will need to be addressed by the offerors. So the offerors will be offering us a statement of work, including a contractor work breakdown schedule, and that becomes their proposal. And we hope to have a lot of opportunities to discuss with the vendors between now and their submission of how this is going to happen to make it the most competitive, innovative solution so that we have proposals in the best interest of public safety. Once they've submitted, those statement of objectives is still our foundation for our discussions and deliberations with FirstNet and the offerors. Once we come to those objectives become the basis of the award, and the award becomes the basis of the contract that we will execute with our partners. Now, with the release of the special notice in April, FirstNet sought feedback from the states, public safety, industry, and several key areas to shape the final RFP. We read, considered, discussed, and debated, as you all mentioned, you debated significantly with us yesterday, all the inputs received on the special notice and draft RFP documents. This included a description of the acquisition approach, nationwide partner or multiple regional partners. FirstNet evaluated the feedback through the lens of our objectives, sustainability and coverage, to include key rural telecommunication provider considerations so that we may ultimately deploy the best network possible for public safety. We believe that gathering the information at this early stage would allow FirstNet to make a decision with the maximum amount of input from our stakeholders. We've incorporated the guidance from our stakeholders' responses into multiple sections of the RFP. Today, we are seeking also board approval to firm up the foundation for the RFP by approving 2 additional key structural elements, including the acquisition approach and evaluation factors, including addressing rural telecommunication provider partnerships. I'm struggling with my clicker. There we go. After careful analysis and weighing the pros and cons, the FirstNet management recommends to the board that the acquisition approach should follow a nationwide provider solution approach. The nationwide solution approach will assure a comprehensive network solution for public safety. This solution is responsible for all 56 states, territories, and inherently will deliver a more consistent package of products and services to public safety. The nationwide solution approach results in an overall economy of scale, which reduces overall cost and complexity. But we also recognize this approach that the supply chain risk associated with a single supplier. A nationwide provider solution approach may make it more difficult to adopt some solutions for small businesses. This approach does not mean that there is no meaningful role for rural telecommunication providers or small business. In point of fact, we have listened and intend to incorporate measures in the evaluation criteria addressing the roles of rural telecommunication providers and small businesses and what they will play. Nationwide offerers will be evaluated on numerous factors, from coverage and capacity, products and architectural factors, pricing, business management factors, past performance, and the use of existing infrastructure, as Jason had discussed earlier. We believe that by recommending these decisions now, this promotes proactive partnership discussions well in advance of the RFP, and it encourages the highest level of small business and rural telecommunication providers' engagement. Remember, our overarching goal is to maximize the efficiency of the nationwide network for public safety. We also intend to build into the award a mechanism to ensure that the innovation and service enhancements can be adopted on a timely basis. So today, we're asking for board approval of a resolution to allow both the updated acquisition approach and this evaluation criteria be folded into the RFP artifacts.
Thank you very much, Mike. The board is now ready to consider a resolution whether to endorse the acquisition plan. Uzama, once again, would you please read the operative portion of the resolution?
Now therefore be it resolved that the board approves the acquisition approach and directs the management team to take all actions necessary to implement the approach in accordance with the principles as presented by the management team to the board.
Thank you, Uzama. So at this time, the chair would entertain action on the proposed resolution.
So moved.
We have a motion, and we have a second. Thank you, Mayor. The floor is now open for discussion on the resolution. Mayor?
Starting from the premise that we laid out earlier, that this, first and foremost, it is designed to serve public safety nationwide in as even a manner as possible. That would tend to push us to, I'm sorry, closer to the microphone. That it seems to me that would tend to push us to a nationwide solution rather than a regional solution, but it is not intended at all to step over. We don't have the, why don't we put up the slide that kind of shows the, there we go. It is not intended at all to be a single answer, but because they have to, however we choose a provider, partner for FirstNet, they will be expected to leverage existing local infrastructure. They will be expected to provide coverage in areas where currently no existing infrastructure exists. And they'll also be working through and with the state authorities, because the state authorities have their own decisions to make in this. So this, even by making this decision, we're still expecting a lot of, I would say, cross-pollination on all of those areas, and it will require multiple entities coming together to make this work.
You're absolutely correct, Mayor. That's the only way that this truly will work, and that's why we keep emphasizing it is a public-private partnership. And that just isn't, the public part isn't just FirstNet, it is all the states, it is all the local communities, it is public safety, and it is all the, on the private side, all the other entities out there to be able to enable that. So not only do we think that that's the only way, we're also taking additional measures in the evaluation factors to ensure that all those objectives, the 16 that we have, are met, and that we can evaluate to get the right solution and offer at the table that will ultimately pull this off for us and with us.
Suzanne?
Thank you. I want to pick up on your very opening remarks about this approach is designed to let the private sector do what it does best and let FirstNet do what it can do best. There was a remark this morning, Chief, your remarks were wonderful this morning. I would only take issue with one small phrase when you made reference to, you know, we're not a typical, maybe you said, federal agency. And as a federal partner, a designee for the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Undersecretary for an organization with the responsibility for strengthening the security and resilience of the nation's critical infrastructure against both physical and cyber risks. I have to stand up first for federal agencies and for the tremendously talented and dedicated public servants that populate those agencies, but also to recognize the public interest commitment that has been made by every member of this board and of the staff of FirstNet. And I will say, in the business that I'm in, we work in a partnership with the private sector every day, and it is a struggle every day to make sure that we are letting the private sector do what it does best, and that we are bringing to the table our comparative advantage, is the way I talk about it. But part of that is that we have the responsibility to make sure that the public interest is being met each and every day. There are very patriotic people in the private sector, but that is not their primary responsibility to take care of the public interest. It is ours. And so one of the key roles that is going to happen with any offer here is aggregation of a variety of capabilities across the country. Some of those will be regional capabilities, some of those will be broader capabilities. And the question that we wrestled with and discussed at length was, who's in the best position to really make sure that that aggregation happens in an effective and efficient way? And ultimately, that's probably the private sector's area of expertise and sweet spot. But it is our responsibility that we're very cognizant of and will observe and ensure happens to make sure that as that goes forward, the RFP spells out the public interest imperatives, and that those are observed every step along the way. And that is for public safety and for the American public. And so I want to reassure folks that that is an appropriate role for a federal entity, even one as creative and innovative as FirstNet.
Thank you, Suzanne. Kevin.
Thank you. I'm just entering my second term on the board, and for a few years before that, trying to help public safety make sure this board came into existence. And so there's some appeal to this approach to getting the job done that appeals to my need for speed and efficiency. Now, I'm also very much in favor of getting something put together that'll work, that's not just put together quickly. And I think that this truly embodies what we talked about all along from 2006 and before to through the enactment of the act to today of a nationwide approach to this network. I think that this type of approach is more achievable. It puts it in single hands or a public-private partnership, but with a focus. I think that there are less opportunities for failure, points of failure. I think that we have much greater opportunities for economies of scale and a streamlined operation. Now, and so I'm very much in favor of this way of doing things. Now, having said that, I'm also a rural guy, and you all have given me the responsibility of interacting with the tribes, and I know that there's concern out there about getting stomped on by a larger operator of this network. And I am convinced that tribal telecoms and rural telecoms can be served well by this approach if we build into it the appropriate checks and balances. And I am very convinced, and I'm sure I'm going to be watching that very carefully as we build it to do so.
Appreciate it. Further comments from the board? Barry?
I guess the one thing I think that we talked a lot about and people have hit on it. Listen, partnering is hard, and it's not an easy thing, and it's not easy to create those kind of win-win relationships. I think the conversation, a lot of that we had was that forcing partnerships at the FirstNet level was not the way to go about this, but to move this back into the hands of people that are used to partnering. I mean, every national solution that's out there today, I don't care what it is, whether it's providing long distance service, there are partnerships that have been created to deliver those outcomes. And ultimately what we've decided here, in my mind, with this approach is that partnering is better left in the hands of the people that are used to doing it on a day-to-day basis, rather than being forced from us. And so I applaud the management team in going through the work and the hard work associated with coming up with this ultimate approach. But I think, from my perspective, I think it's the right approach, and we left things in the hands of the right people. So.
Yes. Neil, and then back to the mayor.
Yeah, just to highlight what Barry said, there will be partnerships, but I think the timing of this is very important because it gives our potential partners time to go and form those relationships. So I think the timing of this is very important to get it out now and to make this a very clear for our potential partners.
Thank you, Neil. Mayor?
When I spoke earlier, I was referencing really partnerships at the local level, partnerships at the state level, but this approach also anticipates partnerships at the nationwide level, not just the partnership between FirstNet and the private sector, but private sector partners coming together to make a proposal to us. So it's horizontal and vertical partnerships, I guess is what we're talking about, to follow Barry's remarks.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Further comments?
Chief, this is Sue.
Yes.
Just a brief comment, if I could. I don't know if somebody else was in line before me.
No, you're up, Sue.
Okay. I really agree with what everybody is saying, and I think we talked about a lot about the approach. I think one of the challenges we have, as we've said so many times, what we're doing is so unprecedented. I think we have to keep in mind while we have certain guidelines to follow from a federal perspective, and I really appreciate Suzanne's comments that, protecting the public good here. I think we're going to have to be creative in terms of the process itself. So we have an acquisition approach and process, and I think, to really make this effective, and we still have to sort of figure out the details. is we're going to have to be able to sit down and really talk with people. And I'm sure we're going to figure that out. But I think it's important for people who are listening to understand that, we're going to have to be creative in that perspective too, because that's the only way we're going to be able to achieve what we're talking about here, is to be able to have those important conversations with many people to achieve the outcome. So I just wanted to add that to it. I know that's not the focus of today, but I think it's an important component to actually realize the outcome we're talking about. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Further comment? Chief?
If I may, as one who represents ultimately the final end user of this product, I see the challenge before us as one of availability and accessibility. And I see that in 3 different arenas. One, that it has to be available to all agencies, no matter big or small. Right. And that product has to be equal in its capabilities. It also has to be available from a cost perspective, because if we are outpricing, again, either large or small, it is not a feasible project for public safety to accomplish. And then last is the timeliness. And that is one of the things that I think is so important as we look at a nationwide approach, that the timeliness and the availability that comes from that for all agencies. Again, it is such a daunting task to say we are going to address the majority of agencies in this country that are 5 to 10 people in size. And we're also going to address those agencies that have 30,000 employees working for them. And that's why I believe that a nationwide approach is probably the best to accomplish those 3 areas.
Further comment? Kind of putting my wraps on this, I understand, fundamentally, that as the chute gets narrower and narrower on clarifying how we're going to procure, we're going to upset some people. And, there's going to be some people that, see their opportunity tarnish or evaporate altogether, or they're going to see a bright light shone on it and they're going to say, wow, this is perfect for us. I understand that, and I expect to hear from people that love this and people that are bothered by it. But with that said, we don't forget our purpose. Our purpose is not that purpose. Our purpose is to deliver a nationwide network for public safety. That's our purpose. And to do so in a timely fashion, and to do so at a price that we can afford in the smallest and most underfunded agencies in this country, but with enough capacity to serve the biggest and sophistication to serve the biggest demands placed on this network. That's our charge. And I think just inherently, when I look at rural America, which is from where I come, there are people operating rural networks that will help us. How do I know that? Because they're the only ones in many of these places. So if we're going to cover it, they're going to end up at the table here. But I also know that in the densest part of this country, the people I just spoke of aren't there. They're not in the densest parts of America. Some of the largest, most sophisticated companies, telecom companies in the country are. It is really going to be the marriage of those 2 strengths into one bid and one picture that hopefully wins favor. Because at the end of the day, we cannot do our job without the small rural telecoms, and we can't do our job, in my opinion, without a nationwide strategy to get this done. We just can't do it. I actually applaud this board and I applaud the staff for the insight to say what we're saying today, to say it 3 months before our RFP is going to be released, so that those people that need to create partnerships and need to create teaming, that they have the time to do it. You want a shot? Here's 3 months' notice about how to create a shot, how to bring your assets and capability to the table, and how to pair that with somebody that is going to bring us a nationwide deployment to serve public safety. I really applaud the lack of surprise. I applaud the transparency, and I applaud the clarity that I think this brings. I also want to thank staff for having the foresight to make sure that we're building factors into our assessment tools on the RFP that are going to make darn sure that we don't build out urban America and get to rural America when we can. We're not going to do that because the evaluation tools on the RFP are going to address that. And they're also going to address things such as adequacy of rural coverage and how much rural coverage do we have. So I don't know how much better you can do if for public safety we have a nationwide crafted approach. It's going to require that the small rural telecoms play or we can't achieve our goals. And we build those evaluation criteria into the process by which we'll select the eventual winner. And we do so with enough time on the front end that people can team, go to firstnet.gov and find our teaming site. You can team and you can partner and you have adequate time, information, capacity to do so. That's where I land on it. Ed?
Thank you. It's hard to follow. I just would like to add an overarching thought here, which we discussed in a lot of detail, which is to make sure that we also create an environment in which innovation can permeate and, let's call, future-proof the network as it gets built out. So I know that Mike and the team are going to incorporate, a mechanism whereby innovative products, whether they be developed by small businesses or large businesses or locally, can be evaluated and subsequently deployed if that's what the market is demanding. And I think that's also something that comes with a nationwide approach where you have an innovation that can know at its destination that the potential market for it is nationwide, as opposed to be restricted into one specific geographic area, for example.
I'd like to, I guess, impose upon staff a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about how we're going to ensure that all participants understand the opportunity that lies here? I mentioned the teaming side. What do we have in terms of outreach, communication, et cetera? What are we going to do to make sure everyone has access to the information?
Well, I'll start and then have TJ follow up. We are, as I mentioned earlier, continuing to reach out. The consultations continue and they're going to be ongoing. You heard a lot of details about that. And we're also the vendor engagements with the community so that we can ensure that they're getting all the information they need to put together the best possible offer and as many possible offers as possible that are competitive, innovative, thought-provoking, and to get to those ultimate 16 objectives. That's the whole reason we made it an objectives-based approach, because we want to hear, getting back to our original thing, let's draw on the experts of what they do best, have them tell us the best way to accomplish this goal. TJ?
Thanks, Mike. I think the key going forward is twofold. One, next week we're meeting with all the 56 state and territory points of contact, and we're bringing everybody into Colorado, and we want to sit down and we're going to dive into this for 2 full days. And we're going to talk through the details of this acquisition approach. And we're going to make sure that we're not just talking, we're listening and having that engagement. And I think that is what we want to continue to go forward with over the next year, not just before the RFP, but leading up to the RFP, during the question and answer periods, and making sure that everyone has the same information and that we're sharing that information very openly and freely as we move forward. On the second side of that is this need to really engage with partners and having the ability to have conversations, to be open and be able to answer questions. This is complex. And we've tried to make it as straightforward as possible when it comes to a nationwide approach, but making sure that we're ensuring that we're going to leverage rural infrastructure. We're going to leverage those providers in the private sector and industry to do what they do best, while at the same point having public safety engaged and having FirstNet engaged on public safety's behalf to ensure the delivery of a mission-critical public safety grade network. And as we do that, we need to make sure that we're talking to both sides, that we're doing this in a win-win fashion so that private industry can bring solutions, can have teammates, and can deliver on the public safety network. So it's a ramped up engagement. We're not necessarily just doing these one-day discussions. We have folks that are across the country engaging both at a local level, at a city and county level, at a statewide level, and a regional level. And we're going to continue to ramp that up over the next year. Many different events related to public safety associations and making sure we're engaging at the association level. And I think over the next year, you're going to see an ongoing change that we also want to engage with firefighters, paramedics and EMTs, police officers, and making sure that they understand what this network is that's coming and that we're going to meet their needs. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Well, Mike and TJ, thank you very much. A further comment before the board before I ask for action on the resolution, Suzanne.
Chief, just to amplify on those points and the hope and expectation that we'll have some robust competition in this, you know, it's obvious this is something that has never been done before. And therefore, it is not a given that traditional approaches or just traditional players should think about participation in this effort. And we really are going to beat the bushes to try to get some innovative and perhaps non-traditional approaches to this, I think.
And I want to react to Secretary Spaulding's comment that there's no doubt we're trying to get as many players to the table, and not just large players. We're trying to make sure that at every level they are coming together with unique approaches, in many cases teaming and providing alternatives, and that we're there to answer the questions because it's complex back to that point. And so over the next 3 months as we lead up to the release of this RFP, it's about making sure we have good competition coming to the table.
Thank you, TJ. And to the Secretary's point, right? And not just size diversity, but maybe people that have never been providers before. Maybe people that haven't been in this space, but can build this space. Our outreach is much broader than the major wireless carriers and the rural telecoms. It is a much broader look than that, because public safety wins when we get the most creative and motivated people to build this for public safety. As long as we're holding the standards and we're holding the end product as an accountability tool, we're never going to take our eye off, which I think is absolutely critical. Any last comments before I ask the board for a vote?
Jeff, can I just add one comment to what you just said? I think one way to visualize what your comments really mean is if we think 2 to 3 years down the road, after in fact we have made a successful award, and after in fact we're beginning deployment, I just want to have a visual that we all understand that that does not mean the role of this board or the role of the FirstNet organization changes in any way. It just means, in fact, that we have a partner that is delivering the capability to, in fact, what this board is driving and, in fact, what the FirstNet organization is driving. And I think that's an important visual as we think about what this is going to look like after the award is made, and again, after the award is made successfully, and we have a partner that deploys. And I think that perhaps gives us a view of, again, how we're going to be active in making sure that we're driving the innovation, that we're driving, as you said, the standards, but that we're also driving the evolving world of public safety and ensuring that we can keep up with that demand.
Well said, Terry. Thank you very much. At this time, I'm prepared to call for a vote. We had a motion, we have a second, and we have wrapped up our discussion on the motion. So at this time, all those in favor of the motion as proposed signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Excellent. The motion carries. Mike, CEO recap, the last word's yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Board, for all your energies and efforts and your adoption of our 2 proposals. We really appreciate that. That'll help a long way in moving this forward. So as we think about the next 90 days to the RFP release, there's a lot of work to do. There's certainly the mechanical parts of a successful proposal and acquisition. You can see them listed here, and the timeline. But I also want to caution all of us, we are on schedule, but we will not, we may slip the schedule if need be to get this right. There's no indication that there is a problem, but I want to make sure we are not going to have, you know, just to push out an RFP until we are sure that you are comfortable and that everyone is comfortable with the approach and the direction we're heading. So I just wanted to highlight some of the activities that are going on that we will be seeking board input along the way and formal board adoption and approval in the December timeframe. We're going to incorporate the final interpretations and the nationwide evaluation approach into our RFP artifacts. That will be hugely helpful. And as TJ mentioned, as we have in the past, we're going to continue to step off with consulting with public safety, industry, and our federal partners to make sure that we're collecting all the possible data and getting this right. As you know, we can't emphasize enough, we need innovation, we need robust solutions, timely, creative ways to get this network deployed as quickly as possible. The thing that, as we get through, and I catch myself on the 46th day thinking about the mechanics of what we need to do to accomplish to get things out, I also remind myself, and I'm absolutely biased, you know, public safety, in my humble opinion, is the world's greatest profession. And the men and women that are doing that are counting on us, whether they're federal, state, local, you know, within the U.S., international, and they're counting on us, and the people that they serve are counting on us to get this done. Congress and public safety fought to make this happen, so it's incumbent on us to get it right. And this is a huge step in that process. I really support the board. I appreciate, as Terry echoed as I started my conversation this morning, FirstNet, it was not born to just issue an RFP and go away. We are moving out. There's a lot of things that have been accomplished, and I really appreciate the board's leadership and insight and tenacity in helping us get this right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Sue, are you still on the line? I'm actually glad she's not. You know, and here's why, is because, darn it, I was just going to say nice things about you, and I thought you would have been embarrassed, so yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate you participating in the today. We're in the hospital this morning, so I just stepped out of the room for just a moment. But I think the board has done a terrific job. I think the management has done a terrific job. I can't remember who said it earlier, but we wouldn't be here today if it weren't for all of the great input, feedback, and both criticisms and you know, constructive feedback from the people who helped us get here. So, as someone said, we have still a lot of work to do, but this is an important step so that the folks who are going to help us build this very important network to be in a position to sit at the table with us in a reasonable period of time to have the appropriate discussion. So, so I'm very pleased with where we are, and again, thanks for your tolerance for letting me participate in your talk today.
Thank you, Sue. Well, prepared to get embarrassed because, you know, I think the one person I wish was here was Sue, and I want to just publicly acknowledge Sue's contribution to getting us to where we are today. She epitomizes the word tireless and epitomizes the word visionary, and it's the combination of those two things that makes her such an effective chair. The insistence that we get this right, and that we be inclusive, and that we break glass when we need to, and that we build really a first ever, and she's very aware of that. I think the architects of this legislation were wise to blend commercial and public safety disciplines, because it's obvious to me day one and obvious to me 2.5 years later how critical it is that we have got that mix, because we both have perspectives the other don't have. Even though over time we overlap a bit, there's still unique skill sets and insights. And Sue, for you and I, it's a daily, if not multiple times a day conversation. I just want to publicly thank you for all you do for us.
Well, I appreciate that, and you should be embarrassed too, because the partnership that I had with you, I think this just shows that there can be a sense of public-private partnership, because we've shown that it can work, and there's a reason why it can't extend beyond that. So, Chief, I appreciate everything you do every day as well.
Thank you. At this time, after a fantastic board meeting, I want to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second. Got a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.